Joining us now, as he does each and every week on Thursdays, is our pal Dan Pizzuta from the 33rd team. He's a writer there, and one of the things he wrote this week was his weekly quarterback rankings. Dan, I have some bones to pick with you later about your quarterback rankings. So we can warm up with some Commanders, but then we can spar a little bit about some quarterback rankings if you're down for that.
Sure, you would not be the only one.
Rankings are so much fun, aren't they? Everyone always agrees.
They are great, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm very happy I agreed to do these this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, all I'm going to say is Kyler Murray's ranking after I just watched what happened to him in Arizona. There might be something to talk about. So let's actually talk about it through the people that did that to him. The Commanders' defense played by far their best game of the season. They are not satisfied with where they are yet, but they clearly are making improvements. What did you see on that side of the ball from Washington that perhaps gives you hope that that side can support Jaden Daniels, who I know you also wrote about this week, and what this offense is doing?
Yeah, I think it was a well-timed game of coming against an offense that I think this pass rush kind of really was able to click a little bit and make the impact you were kind of hoping it might have been able to make. They blitzed a little more than they did the previous, I think, 2 weeks. And it just it got through when some of the coverage was able to hold up. They had some well-timed blitzes that came with, either you had a guy who was, I think one of the sacks was, Bobby Wagner was, spying Kyler a little bit. Then he ends up, rushing late when he doesn't have anyone to really take account of. So I think there were things that kind of were put into the game plan that works really well. And the defensive line was able to hold up. I think the interior defensive line that you were really hoping would be the piece that took over for this Washington defense eventually, I think they all had a good game there. So I think they just kind of controlled the line of scrimmage. And then I think when you kind of look at what Arizona was doing in the passing game, it's still a little siloed, and there's not a lot of, creativity in a lot of these routes. Marvin Harrison Jr. is just kind of running vertical down the sidelines, and, that's easier to defend than some of the other, offenses that Washington has been facing. So I think a lot of it just kind of played into Washington's hand, and I think they had a good game plan to defend it.
One of the things that we talked about earlier in the week and kind of when we were still doing a lot more game review was that the performance was definitely better. And guys like John Allen, like you said, showed up, and Deron Payne showed up in ways that they haven't this year. But it actually wasn't that much different than maybe against Cincinnati. The difference is that Jamar Chase is way better than Marvin Harrison at this point in their careers, and Joe Burrow's way better than Kyler Murray, and especially in specific ways that really hurt Washington, getting the ball out quickly, being able to see through blitzes and stuff that really hurt Kyler. How much of any, like when you try to determine, hey, defense, this was the impact, offense, hey, a better quarterback, a different quarterback, even if they're similar levels, but different skill set where they're stronger or weaker in a certain area. How much of the performance is based off of the opponent? Like, so if you take all of kind of that theory, how much of last week for you was Washington improvement versus Arizona not being nearly the level of, say, Cincinnati the week before?
Yeah, I would say, it was probably a little bit of both. I think it's definitely good that Washington at least, looked like they were more together, in a sense. And I think we've kind of seen when things go wrong for this Washington defense, it's, a blown coverage in the secondary, something is, miscommunicated along the way. There wasn't as much of that, which is good. And I think they kind of, stayed true to some of the easier concepts. I think they dropped how much they played quarters like in this game. So they weren't trying to do as much as like the more complicated matching type of coverages. So it was somewhat of that. I think Arizona did certainly, in the route concepts they were doing, certainly that helped too. And I think the offensive line in Arizona really just wasn't playing particularly well on Sunday either. So I think it was a lot of, this was definitely a better game from Washington's defense, just kind of overall from, I think, game plan and execution. And it definitely helped that I think Arizona had a bit of an off day and it not kind of what we had seen the previous 3 weeks of what, they were kind of able to do from some explosive plays and some of the ways they've been able to hold up on offense too.
Dan Pizzuta, 33rd team, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Of course, they were also chasing the game, I mean, immediately in the second half, if not some in the first half as well, because of what this Washington offense is doing. You wrote about it in your weekend reaction column, which is called First and 10. And Dan, we here are big fans of segments called First and 10, as we do First and 10 to open the show on Monday. So salute on the originality on that one for both of us. But you wrote about Daniels and this offense. What is it like? Let me ask you this, because we talk to you every week, and like we know some of the things that are working. What did you see that was new, that was even more impressive against Arizona compared to the first 3 weeks, which included many good things as well?
Yeah, I think just kind of little by little right now we're seeing things start to just open up in the offense. And we started talking week one. It was like, oh, this is just a condensed Cliff Kingsbury offense. It's going to be all screens and slants and things behind the line of scrimmage, and it raised a little bit of concern. But week by week, it's continued to open up a little bit. In the First and 10 column, I have a kind of a passing heat map of week by week, and you can just see how the ball is getting pushed progressively further down the field, which I think is really good. And I think also what they're doing is, they've been able to use play action a little bit more. That's kind of opened up that intermediate area of the field that they weren't throwing to over the first 2 weeks, really. And I think teams have started to kind of be a little afraid of what Jaden Daniels can do in the run game. So they stopped blitzing him quite as much. And I think his blitz rate has dropped kind of every week. Since it was about the same weeks 2 and 3, but week one they came out blitzing 42% of the time. He was blitzed 16.7% of the time last week. So I think just how teams are defending right now are giving him more space in the pocket also. So not being blitzed, having that play action is allowing him to stand in the pocket a little more. There's now more time to be opening up things down the field. And I think everything's just kind of coming together of just being able to add that element to the passing game, which is what we wanted to see early in the year. And now it's just kind of, it's coming week by week.
Yeah, no, the heat map stuff is great. I definitely would suggest everyone. It's outside of, hey, you can see it opening up week after week. It's hard to explain without seeing it. So I would definitely suggest everyone go to the 33rdteam.com and find Dan's First and 10 column from earlier in the week and check this out. You also have this amazing stat, just the greatest coinky-dink here. There have been 3 games by rookie quarterbacks with at least 0.6 EPA per play and a 60% success rate since 2000. Daniels has had 2 of them in the past 2 weeks, and the other came from Marcus Mariota in week 1 of 2015, but with only 15 pass attempts. I mean, you want to talk about bringing in the right mentor for your guy, Dan. Mariota was clearly the model. Now look at Jaden go, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the crazy things to look at, because I think the cool thing about what Washington is doing right now is they have been able to figure out how to stay away from the negative plays. And I think that certainly helps. I'm not sure how much, at what level that's going to be able to sustain. I don't think they're going to get through, 1 turnover for the rest of the season. But the way they've just kind of been able to have a correct answer for pretty much everything. And very early on, that was, Jaden Daniels scrambling when he could. But now it's, taking some smarter plays. I think they're more diverse in the run game also. So when you just kind of have all of those options together, it's been made for a crazy successful offense right now, and it's really humming.
Dan Pizzuta, 33rd team with us here on the Hoffman Show. That blitz number is pretty staggering too. Tampa blitz 42% in week 1, weeks 2 and 3 around 29%, just 16% by Arizona. But we know Jim Schwartz is coming to town, and he is a very, very aggressive defensive coordinator for the Browns. Do you think he pulls back on that some, or is he just going to be like, I am Jim Schwartz, I am here to blitz, let's party?
Yeah, Jim Schwartz is a guy who's going to do what he does on defense. So I would expect a little bit more blitzing there, but this is also a team that can create some pressure with the front four. They're going to be a very aggressive type of defense. They do like to blitz. They do like to play a lot of man coverage. I'm very interested in what that is going to look like because they haven't been quite as good in coverage. This hasn't been as good of a defense just kind of overall as it was last year when it was arguably, the best in the league or, 1-2 with Baltimore. So they haven't been quite as good, but they've still been able to, create some havoc when, they've done what they've been doing, just kind of being aggressive, creating pressure. But it's when you have a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, it's very hard to play man coverage at a high volume against that because you kind of always, those defensive backs are going to have their backs to the quarterback. And when you have a guy who can run, like we've kind of seen that, like you can't do that against Baltimore. You can't play man coverage. And even against like a Buffalo, you really can't play man coverage because the quarterback is going to be able to, take off and run wherever there's a little bit of a hole. So I'm very interested to see how these kind of two philosophies are going to mesh because I think Jim Schwartz is very much going to do what he wants to do because he only really knows one speed. But I think Washington could have some ways to get around that.
For sure. Trevor Lawrence, I know, had like a 40-yard run earlier this year, and it's like if that's Jaden, he probably scores on that thing. So those opportunities are definitely going to exist. Obviously, one of the reasons why Cleveland's not as good defensively is because they're on the field forever because their offense is real bad. When you look at the biggest problems for Cleveland offensively, what are they?
Nothing works together, and I think that's kind of been a problem since they brought in the quarterback that they brought in. It hasn't completely meshed with the, Kevin Stefanski version of that offense. And they brought in Ken Dorsey this year to kind of be the offensive coordinator, bring in some of the, the Buffalo Josh Allen things to run a bunch of empty, which Deshaun Watson was more comfortable with. Those things just haven't meshed together. And I think every problem that Cleveland currently has in its offense is just kind of compounding on itself. This offensive line is injured. It is not good and also is protecting for a quarterback who likes to hold on to the ball but cannot create when he does that like he used to be able to. So those are things compounding against each other. Right now, Watson is getting hit on 26.8% of his dropbacks. That's the second highest rate in the league behind Jacoby Brissett, who's only playing quarterback because that offensive line is bad and they want to protect Drake May. So Deshaun Watson right now, I think there's 2 games so far this year where he's been hit at least 14 times in a game. And those are, official quarterback hits. So there's probably more times he's been hit. So when you just have that passing game right now that just doesn't have any consistency or anything they can really lean on, nothing works. And then you have some of the receivers who are making mistakes when things could potentially go well. You have the interception last week that hits Amari Cooper like in the chest. And those have just been some ups and downs. And this team just, without a good running game, they just don't really have anything to rely on right now. And everything they could potentially be doing just kind of feels like it's making everything else worse.
If they were to get a guy like David Njoku back, is that enough to change things? Or is there just, do they need a full philosophical flip of running the football and getting back to who they were a couple years ago if they want any chance no matter who the personnel is right now?
Yeah, I mean, the more good players is going to help in some case, but I think right now, just this entire system is, I think the system in a way is broken because they're trying to fit so many different pieces of different systems together, trying to make everyone happy. And I think that's just kind of impossible in the way they're set up right now. And the current skill set that the quarterback has, he's not comfortable with the under center play action. He hasn't been able to execute that in the couple of years that he's been there. And the part that he's supposed to be good at, that empty, the distributing the ball, the creating out of structure, that has completely gone. So right now, I just don't know what they're supposed to be good at. And, if you get Nick Chubb back, he's still coming off this significant injury. So I don't know how much you're going to be relying on that if you can, later in the season. So it's a really tough thing to see how Cleveland really corrects itself on offense because I just don't see an easy answer.
Yeah, I would feel bad for them if they didn't do this to themselves with just abhorrent decision-making. But, sucks to be you sometimes, Cleveland. In fact, most of your NFL history. Yikes.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.